Nobody loses sleep over a bracket being off by one line in the website's code. They lose sleep when WordPress sites get slow, when Ajax endpoint trusts bad input, or a small shortcut turns into the outage during the traffic spikes. And that's the real job here. Keep the site fast, safe, and usable when it actually matters. We use WordPress Coding Standards for that reason. Yes, they help us keeping the code base readable and clean. That's the nice part. The bigger win is that they catch the decisions that quietly out-risk until the site starts consuming money. Performance problems, security gaps, and compatibility issues are a lot more expensive than arguing about the code style. A lot of teams treat coding standards like a formatting checklist, and we think that this misses the point. In the real projects, good standards do more than clean up spacing and naming. They flag patterns that tend to cause trouble later, especially in growing WordPress systems. And that matters because most production issues don't start as big failures. They start as fine for now decisions. A query works because there are only 10 posts. A form trusts browser input because the field looks numeric. A native PHP function gets used because it is quick and familiar. Then the project grows, traffic arrives, other developers join, and those little shortcuts turn into the real problems. We have found that WordPress coding standards help because they interrupt that cycle early. They force the conversation while the code is still in the pull request, which is the cheapest time to fix it. One of the fastest ways to hard a WordPress site is to run heavy WP query calls to pull large results set, and of course lean on the meta query filters. Developers do this all the time because it works at first, so it feels harmless. Then the content grows, the database gets busy, and the same query starts slowing everything down. We saw this with one of our biggest clients. We inherited a WordPress project that had been built fast. It worked fine until the platform started handling around 1,000 new posts per day, and the peak traffic hit about 5,000 users per hour. Under normal load, pages took about 1.5 to 2 seconds to load, and during the peak hours, response time often was seen like about 5 seconds, and all because of inefficient queries. WordPress coding standards would have flagged this much earlier if they would be implemented since start. Our team made some few performance-focused changes that the standard pushed us to, and the application got down to around 150 milliseconds over the long term. What was more important, once the standard became the part of the process, every new feature was checked against the same class of problems. So warnings stopped being the noise and became early signs that something needs to be changed. And this is why we pay attention when standards flag, for example, huge post by page value or using meta query. It shows us that this part of code needs a second look. Technically, those are warnings, okay, but practically they are the code saying that do not merge this on autopilot. Let's verify this. Our rule is simple. No errors, no warnings without a reason. If the code triggers a warning, someone needs to explain why. And most of the time, the better answer is to change the approach. For example, paginate properly, rethink the requirement, or move the expensive work somewhere else, for example, to Algolia for searching and filtering. WordPress should not have brute force its way through a growing dataset. It should work even when the database is large. If a form or Ajax handler accepts the user input, we treat that input as unsafe until proven otherwise. And not because every user is bad, because the internet is internet. A field that looks numeric on the browser doesn't mean it is numeric on the server. If the backend trusts the real data that the user submits in the form, the project is one careless assumption away from security issues. Patch Stack States of WordPress Security in 2025 report found that cross-site scripting or XSS attacks stayed the most commonly reported vulnerability type in the WordPress ecosystem. And this kind of attack can happen when the user input is accepted, stored, or shown on the page without proper sanitization, validation, and escaping. For example, a contact form might expect a simple label like first name, but attacker could send a script instead. If that value gets saved and later shown in the admin panel or in the frontend without escaping, the browser may run the attacker's code, which is insecure. This is where WordPress coding standards help. They catch unsanitized input and push developers to stop and handle it before the code ships. This is the kind of friction that we want. In most cases, user values should be sanitized, validated, cast, or all three at once. And the good version of the code is not really complicated. It's small change, much lower risk of security issues, and we would take this trade every time we can. WordPress core recommendations changed, prefer API shifts, and the community learns which patterns age badly. No developer keeps all of that in their head every day, and that's normal. And it is also why automated standards help. Simple example is a file deletion. Calling PHP handling function directly, of course, works, but WordPress provides WP delete file for this kind of work. Using the WordPress native functions keeps the code aligned with platform expectations and makes behavior easier to manage. That may sound minor, but compatibility issues are usually made of millions of things. One shortcut is fine. 50 shortcuts build a codebase that fights the platform. We have seen this in the maintenance work a lot. A client once asked why a WordPress update needed several hours of development time when it looked like just one click. The site had a custom theme, several plugins, and a few other pieces of code using outdated patterns. The update itself was easy, the more problematic was compatibility fixing. One small change exposed configs in file handling, admin behavior, and plugin hooks. The site needed testing and fixes before it could be safely deployed to the production server. And coding standards help prevent that drift by flagging discouraged patterns before they are spread into the codebase. Adding coding standards to the project is not the hard part because you install the package with Composer, configure PHP CS to use the WordPress rule set, and run it against the codebase. Done. The more important step is deciding how your team responds to what it finds. If standards only produce errors that nobody acts on, they are only decoration. And the value shows when the team uses them to reject weak patterns early and keep the codebase healthy. If the rules complain, we assume that there is something worth reviewing. Sometimes there is a valid exception, fine, but exceptions should be clear, rare, and backend by the real reasoning, not by habit or laziness. That changed the whole conversation around this. Instead of arguing about performance for the 100th time, the team focuses on the decisions that affect delivery risk. Are we creating bottleneck? Are we skipping sanitization? Are we going safer WordPress native options? And that's the questions that we should ask. WordPress coding standards are worth adopting because they help prevent slower sites, weaker security, and avoidable compatibility problems. Clean looking code is nice. The code that does this and also holds up under the pressure is better. If you want to help setting up WordPress coding standards, tuning the rules for your team, or reviewing if a WordPress codebase that has collected too many it work at the time decisions, talk to us. We like fixing this mess before it gets expensive. I will post all the links in the video description. So that's all for today. Thank you for spending a time with me and see you next time. Bye bye.